kind of like what electric has right now with the issue of everybody, a lot of companies wanting to go to the electrification of the engines, but like you could make a 500 horsepower electric outboard, but the amount of batteries and power that you're going to need to power that is not realistic. So how did you get, so what is the power consumption of that? Like if you run the Seakeeper, how much power do you really need to have in order to get, because I mean 10,000 on RPM, that's a fast spinning flywheel.
Well, it varies on that, but I'll say just putting in the vacuum encapsulation, we cut power by, more than 2/3.
Mm.
And you would never be able to spin at the speeds that we do, without having that vacuum encapsulation. But just because we're talking about 10,000 RPM, if you look at our Seakeeper 10 and a half, it's about a 450-pound flywheel.
Mm.
And we spin it at those speeds, but because it's in a vacuum with about the power of a hairdryer.
Wow.
When you get down into our smaller DC products, we're about the power of your stereo.
Wow.
So again, minimal consumption because of that vacuum encapsulation, which really enables us to get on, right? The larger boats, they do have AC power on board. But as you get into the DC power, it's limited. Everything is fighting for that battery capacity,
Hmm.
as you said, and important that we get the power down as low as possible to make sure that we can make gyros practical on every single boat.
Yeah, that is interesting because if it's only, does that equate to like a lengthened boat? Like let's say, because obviously, a 45 footer is going to need a lot more than, a 21. So for someone that's got, let's say a 23 footer, it's only going to need that small. And then also, does it spin at that same rate consistently, or based on sea conditions, does it like, is it variable? Is it just one consistent speed?
Well, you'd spin it slower if you like, but yeah, for us we have two speed settings. One's a lower power setting, but
Mm,
we spin it at that speed consistently to generate that performance.
right.
So again, we have a range of products that take us from 27 feet up to about 150 feet if you add multiple products at the top end of it. Um, but yeah, again, the drive was to get power as low as possible, and it's kind of coupled with right power as low as possible. You want to make it as small as
Mhm.
possible. You want to make it as light as possible, and all of that is driven by the RPM, right? The faster gyroscopic torque, right, comes from the angular momentum, which comes from the weight of the flywheel, the distribution of weight in relation to the axis. So you can make the flywheel bigger
Mm.
or spinning it faster, right? Those things are problematic on boats if you make it bigger or you make it heavier. So we choose to spin it faster because it is the most important thing to get the best performance in a minimal volume, power, etc.
Hmm. That's interesting. Like I'm just trying to wrap my mind around it as you're explaining it to me. So I'm kind of like, well, how does that work? Well, how does that work? Kind of like sparking my interest. But
But don't feel bad because I say the same thing. People ask how it works, right? You get into the physics and you're like, psh, and it's like, I'm not really sure, but what I know is it works and it works really, really well.
yeah,
So hit this button and feel it.
yeah, because I'm like, you got to dumb it down, like bring it to a third grade level for me, like. but that's interesting. So you really, you get down to the smaller ones. I think you said 10. So I'm guessing that's a 10-inch flywheel inside there,
It's about 14-inch
14-inch.
flywheel.
Okay,
Yeah.
and then it using as much power as a like the stereo. So really, if you had like a 23 or 25 footer, you could put the Seakeeper on there and it not be this massive draw on your battery. You would is I'm guessing it takes more power as it's spinning up, but then once you
That's
get
right.
to that speed, then the draw goes very minimal.
That's right. It cuts the power in half or more than half once you're at speed.
Mhm.
So most people spool them up, while they're at dock, on shore power. And, then when you're off and running, you also have your alternator output as you motor your way out. But it's minimal power, as I said. You look at like a 26, 27-foot boat, you typically have dual engines, two starting batteries, and two house batteries.
Mhm.
And, we're installing Seakeeper with two house batteries that are powering the gyro as well as all of the other components on board. and typically you could easily run it for 2 to 3 hours just on those house batteries without even having to start up the
Oh
engines.
wow, wow. Now, and you said this is all like that's all 12-volt stuff. Is there? Do you have different variants like a 24, 36, 48, or is it all basically 12-volt or generator power?
So yeah, it's 12, and then once you get up to our larger product, 4.5, then we have all AC power.
Let's move on to well, actually, why stabilization? What what got you guys so motivated about like stopping, mobilization? Because I think about people, like you were saying earlier about picking something that you really love and you really like, and what I guess what kind of got you so excited about stabilization and
Well, I think boat motion, what you think of, right? That's what people love to be at, but it's the single biggest drawback of being on a boat. The at rest roll motions, where more than 60% of the world gets seasick.
mm-hmm,
And
yeah,
then underway, you have roll, pitch, and yaw motions, which leads to the pounding. And, ultimately, what you want on a boat is to be able to enjoy the journey,
mm-hmm,
right? So getting there with a comfortable ride as well as the destination.
yeah,
And 40% of the people that buy boats, within 5 years, they sell it and never buy a boat again. And I very much believe that that is because of the drawback of these boat motions, specifically the unwanted motions at rest and underway.
mm-hmm.
And our product does the best in the world at addressing those, gets more people into boating and keeps them boating.
Yeah, yeah, that I've got that same experience. Where I know a lot of people that will, get into boating, and let's say they, go fishing, and I've seen people where they'll fish for years. They'll be on the boat, be on the water for a few years and have no issues, but then all of a sudden, start getting seasick out of the middle of nowhere. It's kind of like, well, you've been taking the same trip for 5 years, and now all of a sudden you're getting seasick. So I can definitely attest to knowing people that do have that issue. So yeah, I guess that would be a way because yeah, as soon as you get seasick, it's kind of like I mean the trip's over. It's like that's not enjoyable for you. It's not enjoyable for anybody that's on the boat. Of course, you've always got the captain that's kind of like, well, one more. Like we're gonna stay here for a little bit longer, and yet somebody's over here sick. Like
Well, and that's once you get to the destination, right?
yeah.
So the journey, to me, in what Seakeeper Ride addresses, the pitch, roll, and yaw motions while you're underway.
Hmm.
And again, the journey should be an enjoyable experience, and it's often not. It's also hanging on for your life, and I can't wait to get where I'm going.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
no, like that's not what boating should be.
Mm-mm.
And Seakeeper Ride, as we started with the gyro of the at rest roll and slower speed roll motions, the ride product, takes the pitch, roll, and yaw and reduces those motions while underway.
Mm.
So both products couple to give, what is the ultimate boating experience.
So just for those that don't may not understand that, like, what is pitch, yaw, and roll?
So you have pitch, which is this way, so the fore aft. You have roll motions, the port starboard, and yaw motions, so turning motion.
Mm,
So those are the three motions most problematic in boating. And our product, specifically the ride product, is addressing all three of those while the boat's running.
hmm.
And if you've been on a boat, right, it's not only the pitch
Yeah,
motion. What comes with that is the pounding, the slap, the waves. You get wet. Like it's all a part of that experience that is a downer. At least was until Seakeeper Ride came on the scene, and now we can make that enjoyable.
yeah, yeah. Because you kind of as you're going through the water, yeah, you're going over the waves like this, but then you hit one that jerks you left, jerks you right, or like rolls you over, and so that's kind of how the two would work together. Really, is um, the gyro is when you get there, like you were saying, and then the ride is what gets you there. So you're kind of like full package comfort, really.
And talking about the ride product a bit, because it's the newer product and right newer to the world, just to explain a bit, what that is and how it works. So the first ever vessel attitude control system, and eliminating 70% again of the pitch, roll, and yaw. So they're mounted on the boat's transom below the waterline. And for us, breakthroughs in technology in the actuator and the control and sensing package
Mm,
enable us to move that at a speed with sophistication that can address those dynamic motions. So we're doing 1,000 calculations every second
wow.
to determine the boat's position in all three axes and what we should do and how we should create lift at the transom to address those motions dynamically. So I think everyone that listens to this podcast, I imagine, has some experience with trim tabs,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you hit a button and you can understand how creating that lift at the transom can change the angle of the boat, port starboard, or the running angle fore aft, right? But you do that statically, right? And there are some systems that have come out over the last 10 years that say, hey, rather than you having to touch the buttons, we could help make those static adjustments for you. But there has been nothing that actually dynamically is providing stabilization. So reducing the pitch, roll, yaw rates, and angles, which the Seakeeper Ride product does. And yeah, it's one of those things. I said, I started this that I hit the button the first time, on the gyro, and it was like, holy shit, wow, on my face. And it's that with the ride system, the same while you're underway, and it's one of those things. It's hard for people to understand and wrap their head around until they feel it.
Mm-hmm.
Because people think of, oh, I understand how trim tabs work. I
Yeah.
understand that maybe if someone could touch it, it's like, no, we're moving it 100 times a second from our 1,000 calculations. No one in the world could move it 100 times, let alone have the sophistication.
Yeah, yeah, and especially if you're, talking about like hydraulic trim tabs where it's like you hit the button and you're like waiting for the thing to go down, and then when it gets there, now all of a sudden the conditions are different, so now you gotta bring it back up. So yeah, whereas you're talking about making 1,000 calculations per second. What
Yeah, and I think in the simplest way that I think about it, you have these devices that have been that are trim devices.
mhm,
I really think of them trim, and what ours is a complete underway stabilization system, and I think that really defines. Yeah, they're both on the transom. Yeah, they both create lift. When I'm saying kind of you have interceptors, you have tabs, but only Ride and our controllers are providing dynamic underway stabilization. That's really in a category of its own.
mhm. Well, you've created another category. I mean, it wasn't enough to create one, you gotta do two.
You got to keep having fun.
That's funny. What now does it run off of a GPS, or is it solely based on like how does it work? Like is it,
Yep.
do you need a GPS signal, or is it like calculating based on the boat's motion? I'm how does that
So we use some of the GPS inputs, but it's really the complexity is in the sensing package that is all Seakeeper IP that we had to build from the ground up,
mm,
right? That is making those 1,000 calculations about that boat's
right.
position and all access. And there's nothing on the market today that can do that. We had to build in the sophistication of the most advanced sensing systems in the world that are on modern aircraft,
Yeah.
but get it into a marine package that can get it on a product that ultimately at a price point that we can get into entry level boating. And that's just not avail. And an amazing team that kind of worked hard and diligently to say, not only do we know where the bar is for performance, but we have to get there to make sure this product is accessible for everyone.
Mhm.
And it was a critical decision because we could have came out with this product a lot easier if we targeted big boats,
Yeah.
right? There's more willingness to pay. There's more brand Seakeeper understanding there. But, our vision, 71% of our plants covered. We want everyone to make the most of it. And it was important that we can build that and bring that WOW technology down to entry level boating.
Yeah, that's really good because it's yeah, I think about trim tabs and interceptors and everything else, and it is. I mean, it seems like it's quicker. Like, how long have you guys been developing the Seakeeper ride? Because I think I first saw it in maybe like a couple years ago, maybe 22, maybe a little bit longer than that. How long have you been working on it?
Yeah, it's a loaded question. Interesting answer. The product as you see today, which kind of the first true underway stabilization system,
Oh
2019.
wow.
But we had been working for 10 years prior to that and I'd come up with two products that were very, very good active trim systems.
Mm,
So I said before, right, define this category. You have tabs, interceptors, trim systems, some of them active. Then you have true underway stabilization that is only Seakeeper Ride. We had active trim systems that I believe were better than anything on the market, even better than anything on the market today. But that's not what we were after. We didn't want a better mousetrap.
right.
We had set that bar with Seakeeper that people, when they hit the button, you want the smile on the face, they want the wow. And that's what we wanted with Ride. So we shelved those developments and said, not until we have the technology capable to produce true stabilization underway will we launch something.
Mm-hmm.
And those breakthroughs happened, around 2019, 2020. And really, that's where we got to work. And of course, there was COVID kind of along the
Oh yeah.
way, and several other things that we've had to overcome. But launched in 2022, is the product we always dreamed of, and in many ways better than we dreamed. And you see that by the mass adoption we're seeing in the OEM world
Mm-hmm.
as well as the aftermarket world.
Yeah, I honestly, I mean, do you know how many it might be a question that you don't really want to talk about, but when I go to a boat show and I'm thinking like how many boats have the ride system on it, it's kind of like what percentage is that? I mean, to me it's almost like this is like 50% of these boats got Seakeeper rides now. Like so you really were able um to do that, to put it out there for everybody at a price point where brand new boat, boom, here's the thing, and it's coming with this, like you said, the air conditioning feature that will probably take over the market because it is on everything. Can you want to talk about that or
We're roughly 150 models today where Seakeeper Ride is standard, and this is going to accelerate. And I think the point behind it is when you think of a boat, there's so many brands, and they're all using the same components,
mm-hmm.
right? In terms of their packaging, some different ways, some better ways. But at the end of the day, the one thing that you can differentiate one brand from the other if you're selling it is the ride,
Yeah.
right? You've all heard, oh, our boats are the best ride. But at the end of the day, like today, and anyone who's gotten on a boat with Seakeeper Ride, I don't care how great your hull is. If it doesn't have Seakeeper
Mm-hmm.
Ride, it is not a good riding boat when you compare it to the boats that have Seakeeper Ride.
Yeah.
And ultimately, if you're an OEM, right, you don't want a customer going to a boat show and taking a boat out with Seakeeper Ride and taking your boat out without.
Mm-hmm.
They are going to come off of that trial, right, not understanding how much of it was Seakeeper Ride, how much of it was just the boat,
Right.
but saying, wow, this boat pitched.
Hey there, sorry to take you away from the video, but real quick, did you know that on average a boat owner will spend between $1,000 and $5,000 a year just on servicing their engine? And you could actually pocket and save a lot of that money if you would just do the service yourself. It might seem like a daunting task, but I guarantee you virtually everyone can do it with our guidance and the Boaters program. This is just one skill that you could learn inside the program because we have hundreds of other videos teaching you all kinds of boating skills, as well as a weekly live stream where we have questions and answers with me, as well as a chat feature where you can send videos and pictures, ask all kinds of questions, or look for some advice or some guidance on a project that you're doing on your boat. You can join the program by hitting the first link in the description, clicking join, or visiting bornagainboating.com. Now back to the video.